How's it going? We've got some good grass in this pasture. This is a running pasture that we have. And you'll look, we've got some really good fescue here that's been sown over the years. And actually a lot of clover in here that we've sown this year. Now this is a field that in the past we've always sprayed for weeds real heavily. It's always been bad to have, well, right there, thistle all throughout it. And it's been a problem. And so this year though, because of some issues with the neighbor, we've been cautious to not spray anything. So the way we've gone about it was we sowed a lot of red clover in here this year, or crimson clover if you prefer to call it that. We sowed that in here in the fall, and the clover's really cut back on the number of weeds this year. Also, the rotational grazing has given us a much more solid foundation in our fescue that's in here. So between the clover and the fescue, we're looking really good this year on our grazing feed. So when do we do that? We try to get sown in August if possible. This last year we were actually a little late getting seed in the ground, so it was almost the end of October before we even got started good with putting seed in the ground, but that's not typical. Most years we try to get started in the middle of August and have it sown in by the middle of September, if at all possible, if the weather's cooperating and the hayfield's cooperating and everything else. What are you looking for in a good pasture? For us, when we get ready to sow in the wintertime, we sow on fields like this where I'm not going to be spraying. I would sow clover and I would sow more fescue. And I don't do fescue every year. Hopefully this field next year will need almost nothing. I may put a little more clover in the ground just to keep banking that up and give it a little bit stronger. But hopefully in about 2 years, we'll be looking at this field not really needing much other than maybe an every other year dose of something just to kind of help fill in some bare spots. Now on my other fields where I am going to be spraying, or my hay fields where I'm going to be cutting hay more frequently, we plant ryegrass. I use straight Marshall because for years we would put oats in the ground. We've done wheat. All those are fine. Nothing wrong with it if you do it. A lot of people in this area are really wild about black oats now. I haven't actually grown any myself. I may experiment with some next year. But we found that ryegrass, especially Marshall, does fantastic by itself. It really doesn't need anything else. So I stick Marshall in the ground. It comes up and it takes over. We used to mix Marshall with oats, and what I found was that the Marshall just choked out most of the oats, and you'd end up with 2 or 3 spots that had really good oat covering, and the Marshall would take over everything else. So we said, well, why are we wasting time with oats? Let's just do the Marshall. We're using it for grazing mostly anyway, or for making early spring hay. That spring hay we're going to wrap, so it works great with the ryegrass to cut it. I'm going to cut it in the boot stage. You don't have to wait as late. If you're not familiar with boot stage, that means cutting it before it puts a head on. While it's still growing, that means that the plant has the richest material in it that it possibly can, and that tends to make the best hay. So cut it early. This time of year in northeast Georgia, like where we are here, it's hard to get hay dry. So our goal with that ryegrass first cutting is that we're going to cut it, let it lay on the ground about a day, 2, maybe even 3 if it's real wet, and then we're going to wrap it up for baleage. Put it in some nice little white rows. You may have seen, quote, marshmallows as you rode down the road and see them on the side of the road. Well, that's baleage. What happens is we cut all the oxygen off to it. The hay go inside of that wrap, sits there, and it ensiles. So it's like making silage, except using hay to do it. We wrap that hay with somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60% moisture in it, sometimes more. It gets a little iffy if you go too much higher than that, but 40 to 60% moisture in it, we're doing pretty good. We're pretty happy with that. The moisture in there, because it doesn't have any oxygen, won't burn. It won't get hot, and instead it will ensile, and it will turn that into sometimes a 18 to 22% feed if you really hit it just right on. So it makes some really good quality hay. Does really good stuff. It costs a little bit, especially with some of the shortages that we're facing right now, but all in all, it's worth it for us to be able to do that. Once that cuts off, what we do in the summer is we have 2 or 3 fields connected to each farm that we then spray down, kill it off, put down sorghum Sudan seed, which works real good in this area. Something like sugar grazer. There's other kinds out there if you prefer, and we'll plant that about June the 1st, put it in the ground, let it get up good, and then we'll graze that. We'll graze it all summer. I especially like to creep graze my calves on it. I've got special built creep gates that go in. Calves can get out, the mamas can't. Calves can go out on it and graze all day long. That stuff grows extremely fast. So what we'll do is we'll let the calves gnaw it down. If it gets a little too wild, we'll turn the cows in on it, let them clean it up for a few weeks, and we may even run the bush hog over it one time just to clean it up. Let it get back, keep them off of it for a few weeks, and then turn them back on. Then late in the summer, we'll cut them off of that, and we'll roll that stuff for hay. It makes some real good hay, or especially if you're going to wrap it. Sometimes it's a little hard to dry it down, depending on how thick you've planted it. If you can get it dried down, it makes great hay. If you can't get it dried down, it makes great baleage. So it's just a matter of whichever one works for you. But that's our process. That's how we run things. We spray pretty much all of our pastures that are sprayable, except for places we put clover. Into February, 1st of March, we try to get out there, run over it with a dose of Duracor, some surfactant. I like to throw in a little bit of Relegate or whatever remedy substitute that you like. Throw that in there just to take care of any briars and in our area blackberries. It helps get that cleaned up, and that's how we manage our fields. I'm sure there's ways we could get a lot better. We do it to be able to rotate these jokers here and keep them full and fat year round if possible. Have a good one.
Thanks for shooting the bull, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so that you can get all the latest updates.